NASCAR is entering its offseason following one of the most entertaining seasons in its history. In Kansas, they had the closest finish in NASCAR history. Just 9 weeks after the closest 3-wide finish in history, Kyle Busch got into a fistfight in an exhibition race because he decided to wreck someone on lap 2. NASCAR was sued by 2 teams that currently compete in the sport, and a spin in a random June race in the regular season directly affected the championship outcome 5 months later. There were multiple photo finishes throughout the year, a flip in every series including 4 in the Cup Series alone, along with the biggest crash in series history as well. Manufacturers were straight up manipulating races just to send their driver into the championship 4, and we witnessed the first wet weather oval race in NASCAR's history. There was a Goodyear tire meltdown at Bristol that ended up saving the race somehow, and we even saw back-to-back walk-off regular season wins to allow 2 drivers to advance to the playoffs that had no business being there. But it all started back in February, where the wildness immediately began in the duels. The qualifying duels for the Daytona 500 are NASCAR's way to lock in the field for the race and set the positions third on back, normally being a calm race for 60 laps due to them racing their 500 cars that have been worked on all off-season. This being proven once again after Duel 1, when all but 2 cars finished the duel and there was just 1 yellow. Yet in Duel 2 a flip would be switched, and it set the tone for the rest of the season, when Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski forgot they weren't racing in the 500 and set off a massive wreck with 14 to go in the tri-oval, sending Ryan Blaney head-on into the wall and involving over 50% of the cars in the race. This would only be the beginning of a terrible season for the 2-time champion Kyle Busch, however, who endured the first winless season of his full-time Cup Series tenure. His season looked to be getting off to a normal start, leading the points after narrowly losing in a 3-wide photo finish at Atlanta. But it would be all downhill from there, as throughout 2024 Busch seemed to be spinning or wrecking every race, getting involved in a gateway crash that set off one of the worst stretches of his career, which saw him finish 35th at Iowa, 35th at New Hampshire, and what was possibly the worst race of his career after multiple crashes, including crashing by himself under the pace laps. The next week at Nashville saw him lose a good finish after a restart crash in multiple overtimes, and a few weeks later he would be flat out junked entering turn 1 at Pocono by Corey LaJoie, racing back in the 20s. A wreck late at Indy before the Olympic break sealed him into a win in you're in, which he nearly did, almost winning both Daytona and Darlington, but losing at Daytona to the tandem of Harrison Burton and Parker Retzlaff, and at Darlington to Chase Briscoe, forcing him to miss the playoffs for the first time in over a decade. But winning was still on Busch's mind for 2024, trying to keep his winless streak alive, and at Kansas he was in prime position late in the race to do so, leading late in the race until he would approach the lap car of Chase Briscoe, who ended his hopes of continuing his winning streak.
In the wall! Busch is gone! It's over for Kyle Busch!
Let it roll. Caution is out.
A day that looked like a dream run, and maybe a victory run, has come to an end.
Yet that probably wasn't even the most embarrassing moment of his year, after he took a right hook to the face from Ricky Stenhouse, following Busch junking him on lap 2 of the All-Star race, which meant Stenhouse sat and waited around all race just to punch Kyle Busch. Quick side note, 94% of my viewers aren't subscribed, so if you enjoy the content, why not hit the button? Waiting on short tracks to fully dry from the rain though, is a thing in the past for NASCAR, who debuted their new wet weather oval tire in Richmond for the first 30 laps of the race to a resounding success, allowing NASCAR to probably save the New Hampshire race from getting cut short to darkness by putting on the tires following a lap 220 rain delay, swapping to the tires with a damp racetrack, and even putting on better racing in the process, just barely finishing before it got dark. However, in the first wet weather race at Richmond, the moment would be overshadowed by an officiating dispute on an overtime restart, after Kyle Larson was turned bringing out a caution and costing Martin Truex Jr. his final career win. Denny Hamlin would win the race off of pit road, later jumping the restart and clearing his teammate off a 2, sealing his win. Truex would then show his displeasure of Hamlin jumping the start by running into him during the cooldown lap. But this wasn't even close to the most controversial moment at Richmond this year, as again a late caution would send the field into an overtime restart, while Austin Dillon was in the middle of his best career race, taking the lead on pure speed and driving away to a playoff appearance until that caution. On the restart, Dillon immediately lost the lead off of turn 2, and on the white flag while nearly 2 car lengths back entering the last corner, he decided to do this to try and save his season.
Joey Logano through 3 and 4 for the final time. There's the contact! He does get to him. The 11 on the inside. He gets into the wall. Dillon's gonna win it at the line.
Logano and Hamlin would rightfully be frustrated, with Logano calling the move chicken shit and further cooking him in his interview.
Not even close. Then he wrecks the 11 to go along with it. and then he's going to go up there and thank God and praise everything with his baby. It's a bunch of BS. It's not even freaking close. I mean, dude, I get it, bump and run. I get it. I didn't back up the corner at all. He came in there and just drove through me. It's ridiculous.
Logano even went as far as to revving up his engine down pit road, smoking his tires near Dillon's family to show how he felt, costing him a cool $50,000. But Dillon's move would end up being all for naught, as NASCAR would let the win stand for a few days before dropping the hammer on his move and taking away the playoff spot he would have earned, which also meant the team would lose out on millions of dollars in owner points, going from a worst possible finish in the standings of 16th to finishing the year 32nd in the standings. That finish also overshadowed another tire debut in NASCAR, as that race saw the debut of Goodyear's soft tire, allowing teams for the first time in history in a points race to have a choice between tires. And outside of helping Daniel Suarez for a bit, the tires did virtually nothing to improve the racing or add to the strategy. The entire idea stemmed from a one-in-a-million moment in Bristol, when the track refused to take grip, changing the entire complexion of the race, even though it was the exact same tires from the race prior, where 61% of the fans on a Jeff Gluck poll said it was a good race, later jumping up to 87% for this race. Why is that? Well, since the track refused to take grip, the tires just basically shredded from lap 1 of a run, setting up the most tire fall-off ever seen in a next-gen car. With the track behaving like a pack race for portions of it, along with multiple comers and goers every tire run. Featuring 2 loop data records, with 61 lead changes and 3,589 overall passes, blowing the previous highs of 47 and 2,427 out of the water. The race would be won by Denny Hamlin, but this eventually ended up being a detriment for him, after he'd be docked 75 driver and owner points and 10 playoff points, while his crew chief was fined $100,000, along with his win in the race no longer counting for anything towards the playoffs. All of this would come out months after he won the race, so why was he penalized, you might ask? Because in NASCAR there's a rule that when you win and want to reuse the winning engine, you must allow NASCAR to do a teardown of your engine before you're allowed to rebuild it for a second event. And Hamlin's team did not do this, instead choosing to rebuild it without sending it to NASCAR, then running it, later reporting it to NASCAR themselves. This wouldn't even be the biggest cheating issue of 2024, as Alex Bowman's entire season would be ruined after the round of 12 cutoff race at the Roval because his car was 17 pounds underweight, knocking him out of the playoffs and giving his round of 8 spot to the already eliminated Joey Logano, who probably shouldn't have even been there to begin with. 2024 was the worst season Logano had posted in nearly a decade, lacking speed week in and week out, and was well on his way to missing the playoffs. That was until a 2-to-go spin from his teammate at Nashville set off a chain reaction that changed his entire season. Because after a record-setting 5 overtimes, Logano made his fuel last all the way to a victory, which ended up saving his season. Because without it, he would not have made the playoffs. Yet like clockwork in an even year, the performance showed up in the playoffs for the 22, winning immediately in Atlanta to make the round of 12, using the Bowman D&Q to make the round of 8, and once he got to the round of 8, he went out and did this in the first race of the round.
Can you believe what you are seeing? Joey Logano is the last into the round of 8. Joey Logano wins Las Vegas. He's going to Phoenix.
2024 was a destructive year for NASCAR, starting off immediately in the first points race of the truck season, where the entire race was a mess, leaving just 3 trucks finishing the race after a huge last lap crash and a flip, being caused by Raja Carruth trying to fit into a hole that was never going to work, and wiping out the entire field in the process. Even in the sport's biggest race there was carnage, as this year's edition of the Daytona 500 featured one of the largest crashes seen in its history, seeing the big one collect 23 cars late in the race. The wrecking didn't only occur during the 500 for Daytona, as the Coke 0400 was not spared from the crashing, featuring a 17-car big one in stage 2 to kick things off, followed up by Michael McDowell nearly blowing over in the middle of the corner for a second big one, and ending things off by sending Josh Berry on his roof down the Daytona backstretch. However, the sibling track to Daytona would somehow end up being even more destructive this year, with both Talladega races including a massive pileup. Starting off with the crash on the white flag of the spring race, when Michael McDowell threw one of the worst blocks of the decade and sent himself spinning, taking out the entire field behind him, and making Corey LaJoie finish the race on his side, later rolling over after the start-finish line. But that wreck doesn't compare to the playoff race big one. We're in the middle of a major points battle, the largest crash in Cup Series history would end up being set off.
And look at that, look at the speed of the pack. Here we go. Cindric's gone, so too is Logano. Harrison Burton's in there. LaJoie. The whole field. My goodness.
Something stacked everybody up on the front 2 rows. The push has got, something happened to slow them down. Look at this mess.
Along with the huge crashes, came an insane amount of flips on non-super speedways, beginning during the Michigan weekend where shockingly both series included a flip, with Kyle Sieg blowing over at 160 miles per hour on the white flag of the Xfinity race, and Corey LaJoie for the second time of 2024 flipping, this time down the backstretch of Michigan in nearly an identical flip to the day prior. Lastly would be the most crucial, coming during the Cup Series playoffs after the regular season champion wrecked out and flipped during Stage 2 of the Las Vegas race.
And the car goes over! Tyler Reddick has flipped!
2024 wouldn't just be a year for destruction in NASCAR though. It would also produce some of the best finishes seen in the history of the sport, as well as the closest finish in NASCAR history. The first jaw-dropping finish occurred during one of the best races you'll ever see in NASCAR, as after the reconfiguration of Atlanta, the track has put on banger after banger for races. On the white flag of the second race of the season, it seemed as if Ryan Blaney had the win locked up, until Kyle Busch would take a huge run and shoot the gap, slowing both down enough for Daniel Suarez to make it 3 wide, which is the way they stayed until the line.
Side him 3 wide, off turn 4. Here they come to the flag, 3 abreast, photo finish.
I think it's Blaney. Unbelievable 3 wide finish. Have you ever seen anything like that?
Scoring.
Finish is under review.
Scoring has the margin between the first 3 cars at 0.00 seconds.
How awesome was that?
3 weeks later at COTA in the Xfinity Series, SVG, Austin Hill, and Kyle Larson beat and banged their way to a phenomenal finish. And just 3 races later in the same state, at a track no one would expect in Texas, another classic finish would be put on display, when Ryan Sieg in search of his first win lost in heartbreaking fashion to Sam Mayer, in another photo finish, winning by just 2 1,000ths of a second, while pocketing over $100,000 in the process. 2 weeks after Texas, NASCAR fans were again treated to a stunning finish, this one being the closest finish in NASCAR history, coming at Kansas Speedway, when on an overtime restart Chris Buescher and Kyle Larson dueled for the win.
Larson up top, all the way up top. Buescher.
He's on the outside. He's in position. He's got it.
And here comes Truex. They're going to close right to the 2 leaders. Coming to the line. Crash together. I believe Buescher.
I think you're right. It's so close. It may be the 5.
Hold on. Well, let's have a look at the video.
Uh-oh, boys.
Buescher is ahead. Larson is coming. It's like the Kentucky Derby.
Oh,
it's
my
that
wow.
close. It's Larson.
Holy cow. What a finish, boys.
Chris Buescher would again be on the wrong side of a battle the next week at Darlington, when Tyler Reddick door slammed him trying to pass for the lead late in the race, cutting both their tires down and handing the win to Buescher's boss, who snapped a winless streak dating back to Talladega in 2021. At Gateway, Ryan Blaney would lose the race, after running out of fuel coming to the white flag, being passed by his teammate Austin Cindric for the win. And at Indianapolis for the Xfinity Series, Riley Herbst, Eric Almirola, and Cole Custer put on a show for the best finish at the track's history for anything NASCAR related, seeing multiple lead changes on the final lap, with Riley Herbst eventually coming out on top. Fans wouldn't have to wait long for another photo finish in the Cup Series either, because in the playoff Talladega race, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Brad Keselowski made it 3 photo finishes on the year, with Stenhouse winning by 6 1,000ths of a second, officially seeing the 2024 season have 3 races in the top 8 closest finishes in NASCAR history. But it wouldn't stop there, as one more all-time last lap was in store, this time at Homestead, when all the drivers racing were fighting for a chance to compete for a championship in Phoenix, knowing the winner of the race would automatically make it there, and if you didn't win, there was a high likelihood you wouldn't make it at all.
Hamlin goes to the top. He's looking for the huge run down the backstretch, but can Reddick do it from the bottom? This championship this year has given us some of the most incredible closing moments. You pick this one. Blaney, Reddick, or Hamlin. Reddick is not done with yet. Tyler Reddick just drives all the way around Ryan Blaney. Can you believe what you've just seen? Reddick's going to Phoenix. Tyler Reddick wins the Straight Talk 400 in the most incredible way.
Although 2024 had its insane moments, there were also levels of controversy never before seen in NASCAR. Beginning immediately in the Daytona 500, when fans complained after NASCAR waited too long to throw the yellow, forcing the race to end under caution, as many believed the caution for the spinning 2 should have been thrown before they took the white flag. Also in the 2024 Coca-Cola 600, a crown jewel event for the sport, the race was cut short due to a rain shower, and the track taking too long to dry. Normally this wouldn't be an issue, but this time they waited for hours, made the fans sit in the rain, nearly dried the track all the way and were minutes away from calling the drivers to their cars, yet at the last second the race was called late in the night, on lap 249, giving the win to Christopher Bell, with NASCAR's reason to call the race being, the track was too humid to complete drying. NASCAR also walked headfirst into controversy during their charter negotiations, giving the teams a poor deal, and then forcing them to sign a contract within a day of it being presented, in order for the teams to keep their charters for the next year. Every team but 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports would sign the deal, and soon after the two teams came together to sue NASCAR for a better deal, calling them out for monopolizing the stock car racing world, as they get the most money out of everyone in the sport. But the biggest controversy of 2024, however, came during the round of 8 elimination race at Martinsville. As when William Byron was one pass away from being eliminated from the championship 4, two Chevys in Austin Dillon and Ross Chastain rode behind him, refusing to pass him, lap after lap late in the race, allowing him to retain his advantage over Christopher Bell, even stating Chevy's intentions over the radio.
If we pass that 24, he'll be out.
Does the one crew chief know the deal?
Yeah, it should. Nice and far with the 24 here. Are the Chevys literally just roadblocking?
Pretty much.
Yet Bubba Wallace would start to have a tire issue with 2 to go, forcing him to slow down considerably and allowing Bell to catch him and pass him for 18th using the wall to make the final 4. However, this wasn't the case, as NASCAR would wait over 10 minutes past the checkered flag falling to make the official word on who's in the final 4. Eventually penalizing the 20 for wall riding, which was banned following Chastain's move 2 years prior, granting the 24 a ticket into the final 4, allowing Chevy to get away with race manipulation. Bell later called them out for it in Phoenix, stating he felt cheated over the entire thing, and said, "The Chevys manipulated the race which forced his hand." The entire 10-race NASCAR playoffs this year would be very wild, which started off 2 weeks before they even began, when the 32nd place car in points Harrison Burton walked it off at Daytona and won his first ever cup race to make the playoffs.
And may race his way into the playoffs. Busch goes low. Burton blocks. He gets back up. Comes to the line. Jeff, your little boy has done it. Harrison Burton wins in Daytona.
The Harrison Burton walk-off would be followed up the very next week by another one, this time by Chase Briscoe, who was on no one's radar going into Darlington, coming in with 40-1 odds to win. But he ended up winning to make the playoffs, with it being dedicated to his team Stewart-Haas Racing, who was shutting its doors just 10 weeks after, following 16 years in the Cup Series.
Kyle Busch throwing everything at Chase Briscoe he can. It's a win, and you're in. And the 29-year-old from Mitchell, Indiana, Chase Briscoe, wins the Southern 500 and is going to the playoffs.
Once the playoffs began in Atlanta, it only took one stage for an issue with a championship threat to arise, as at the end of stage 1, Kyle Larson lost control of his car, slamming into the turn 2 barrier and collecting Chase Briscoe, and after an overtime restart, it was Joey Logano and the 22 team winning their way to the round of 12. Being followed up the next week at Watkins Glen with a phenomenal finish between SVG and Chris Buescher, with Buescher passing SVG after a slight bobble in the bus stop and driving away to his first and only win of 2024, after him being on the wrong side of multiple finishes. The first elimination race of the playoffs saw nothing of note happen, with Kyle Larson absolutely dominating the race, and Ty Gibbs, Harrison Burton, Brad Keselowski, and Martin Truex Jr. being eliminated from the playoffs. The round of 12 started off at Kansas, with the Ross Chastain win being his first and only win of the season, along with another Kyle Larson issue to start the round. And at Talladega, a penalty set Daniel Suarez back until he ruined his own season by clearing himself while going a lap down, as well as a massive one with 6 to go, virtually ending the playoffs hopes of Chase Briscoe and Austin Cindric, while Cindric was running in the top 5. At the round of 12 elimination race at the Roval, Tyler Reddick would have to fight all race to save his season, after barreling into a crash and knocking his toe out, just barely coming back to knock Joey Logano out of the playoffs once the checkered flag flew. But when Alex Bowman was disqualified for his car being underweight after the race, Logano was the next man up to take his place into the round of 8. Reddick would endure another setback the next week at Las Vegas to begin the round of 8, after crashing with Chase Elliott and rolling his car down the front stretch. And at the end of the race, it was Joey Logano using fuel strategy to eke out a win over the dominant Christopher Bell, later being the reason why Bell failed to make the Final 4. At Homestead, one of the best playoff races in his 20-year existence would be run, seeing every lane be competitive, eventually coming down to 3 drivers needing a win going at it on the white flag, with Tyler Reddick ripping the fence in 3 and 4 around Ryan Blaney to take the win and become the second driver locked into the championship race. And lastly, for the round of 8, again 3 playoff drivers would go at it late in the race for a win, all needing to win to make it through. But this time it was Ryan Blaney who came out on top, passing Chase Elliott with less than 15 to go after a clutch drive from the back half of the top 10, all the way to the win on a long green flag run. Also, Byron pointed his way into the Final 4 after help from his Chevy teammates. The Final 4 would be set for Phoenix after this race, featuring Ryan Blaney, who was looking to become a 2-time champion, Joey Logano trying to become a 3-time champion, which would tie him with multiple legends of the sport, as well as Byron, who is hoping to change his fortunes from last year and become the driver who holds the Bill France Cup at the end of the day, and Tyler Reddick, the regular season champion of this season, while trying to secure a championship for the team that is currently suing NASCAR. And at the end of the 312th lap at Phoenix, only one of these drivers would be crowned the champion.
Your very best lap here.
2 teammates. Who you got? Logano or Blaney? 1 to go, presented by Credit One Bank. This has been an extraordinary season of motor racing. The NASCAR Cup Series is alive and well, and it's given us thriller after thriller after thriller. This is Blaney's final shot at it. He goes up high. There's traffic low. Joey Logano steps into history. He's a 3-time Cup Series champion.
Nobody better. Nobody.